One thing on your farm that I think makes a great difference is stacking enterprises. So that's adding goats, sheep to a beef enterprise, or maybe you're adding poultry, you may be considering pigs. On today's episode, we are not talking about another stacked enterprise in my mind, but we are talking about a adjacent enterprise. It's an enterprise that requires a few different skills than you need with grazing grass and managing livestock, but they're very easy to learn. On today, Adam's going to talk about getting started with it and how much time it's going to take. And if you're interested, you may want to do it completely hands-off and just provide a habitat for the animals so that it benefits your environment there. It's a great episode. You'll enjoy it. Okay, Adam, we'll get started with the Fast Five.
Right.
What's your name?
My name is Adam Martin.
Where's your farm located?
We are located in Cologa, Tennessee.
And do you have a name for your farm?
Our farm name is B Strong Homestead.
All right. And what year did you start grazing animals?
We started in 2020.
Oh, just right at the pandemic.
Yep.
And what species do you graze?
We've got a mixture of orchard grass, Johnson grass, white clover, kind of a little bit of anything and everything. We've tried planting some just game seed basically for the deer.
Oh, yeah.
And then some winter wheat is basically what we've done.
Oh, yeah. And you're grazing a few dairy cows on that?
Yeah, we've got 2 cows in milk right now. We've got a heifer that's going to be bred here pretty soon, and then a couple little calves. And so that's what we're rotating. Of course, right now it's middle of winter, and there's not a lot of grazing going on. It's more throwing round bales of hay, seed bombs, and feeding the cows that way.
Yeah. Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Gal Hardage, and each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. Attention ranchers, are you ready to boost your ranch's profitability in 2025? Join Noble Research Institute for Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas this January 28th, 29th. This transformative 2-day course will help you unlock the full potential of your land and livestock. Noble's experienced advisors, with over 200 years of combined experience, will guide you through proven strategies to enhance your bottom line. You'll learn how to improve soil health, maximize forage quality, reduce costly inputs, and optimize stocking rates. This course is designed to address your unique challenges and build lasting solutions for your ranching operation. Through hands-on activities and interactive conversations, you'll gain valuable skills to create a more resilient, productive, and profitable ranch that will thrive for generations. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from the best and secure your ranching legacy. Space is limited, so visit noble.org today to enroll in Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas, January 28th, 29th. Invest in your land, livestock, and livelihood this January. The last episode or two, we have not done 10 seconds about my farm, nor 10 seconds about the podcast. It's kind of a boring time for me. During winter, I'm looking forward to green grass. But one thing I'm really enjoying is as we unroll bales of hay out or we do some bale grazing, we utilize both of those, is seeing the amount of manure that's spread out across the pastures. There's lots of benefits to getting that manure, urine, the leftover hay into other pastures than you normally do. And you can really decide where you want that and control where it goes. For 10 seconds about the podcast, if you're listening to this podcast, you know we're talking about beekeeping today. It's a little bit different for the podcast. I think it's a great adjacent enterprise for your regenerative farm. I've had bees for a long time. in varying levels, at varying levels of success. I'm an amateur beekeeper as well as an amateur grazer and amateur podcaster. We've started a sister podcast called Apiary Chronicles that shares stories of beekeeping. Very similar structure to the Grazing Grass. So if you're interested in beekeeping, you might click on the link in the show notes. And with that, let's get back to Adam. Why'd you decide to get a couple of dairy cows? Because those are not the easiest things to deal with every day.
Yeah. So when we moved, we're actually full disclosure, we are recovering Californians. We moved to Middle Tennessee in 2018, and our intention was to homestead. And
Oh,
so
yes.
we wanted to just basically live off the land as much as we possibly can. And milk cows was on the list. It wasn't at the top of the list, but pretty quickly we got to it. And especially once COVID kicked off, it was actually my COVID purchase.
Oh, yes.
I knew a buddy, actually, he wasn't even really a friend at that moment, but I saw an ad for a couple of dairy cows and it wasn't very far from us. And I stayed up all night the night that I had heard, through back channels that everything was going to get shut down. And my wife and I just said, what the heck? Let's go grab these cows. We knew nothing, had no idea
Oh,
what
yeah.
we were doing. We've both been raised in the city. We just knew we wanted dairy cows. My wife knew she wanted to make butter and, we love
Oh,
cream in our
yes.
coffee. And so it was just kind of a no brainer. And that's really how we started in dairy cows.
And those cows, were they in milk when you bought them?
No, they had both been dried off. They were both heavy
Oh,
bred. So they were both about 8 weeks out from dropping calves. And we actually, once they dropped those first two calves, of course, we had no idea what we were doing. We bought a milker based on a recommendation that we got. And we actually ended up sitting on that milker and just grazing those cows for at least a year before we actually got set up, built a stanchion, and got going on milking cows. So it took a minute.
the great thing about that, when I'm asking my wife, say, "Hey, can I do this?" or "What about this idea?" Oftentimes she's like, "Well, you get everything ready, you can do it." And I fully agree. But then somehow I get something and I bring it home and I'm not quite ready. So having those dry cows gave you time to get a stanchion, but it looks like you grazed for a little bit before you really got into it. But you're using a automatic milker to milk your cows?
Yeah, so we bought it's a 12-volt system, which is nice because we don't have electricity out in our milk barn, and I can also take it
Oh,
out into
yeah.
the field if I needed to. There's always a little bit of handwork involved, even when you've got a machine milker. But yeah,
Yeah.
we've got 2 cows and milk. Takes me about 30 minutes every morning to milk them, and we just do the once a day milking. We calf
Oh,
share,
yes.
so we let the calves have the mamas the whole rest of the day, and then we just put them up at night, basically.
Oh, so you put the calves up at night and then you go milk in the morning, and then after milking, you turn the calves back to the cows.
That's it.
Does that provide you enough milk for your home as well as selling a little bit, or are you using it all in-house?
It does. We only use so much. So right now I think we're getting about maybe 3 to 4 gallons every morning. So we've got a private membership association that we share our milk through. And so we've got plenty of friends that are super happy and glad to take our milk off our hands, the extra that we have. So
Are your cows Jersey or Jersey Cross
they are Jersey crosses, both of them.
and an A2 A2?
One of them is an A2 A2, one of them is an A1 A2 or A2
Hmm.
A1. I can't remember,
Yeah,
it's one or the other.
same difference,
Yeah.
huh?
As far as I call them R2D.
Oh, yes. There you go. Yeah. Is that something you want to expand, or is 2 cows right where you wanna be?
We feel like we can basically we have kind of a sustainable, for the land that we've got. We're only on about 11.75 acres.
Oh,
We
yeah.
do have we have several free leases basically, which we're super
Oh, very
blessed. One of
nice.
them is right across the road from our farm. And so I'm able to run the cows over there. The gentleman that owns it, it's a deer hunting property, basically rec property. And
Oh, yeah.
he just basically said, have at it. And so I went over there and I cross fenced it with a bunch of electric fence. And I think I've got a total of 5 paddocks over there. It's got ponds on it. So they've got natural water. So that's really where the cows spend about 9 months out of the year over there. And I push them over there every single day and hit a different paddock every day. And we've done really well with that.
Oh, very nice. Did you have any gotchas when you started milking your cows? You're like, oh man, I did not know this was coming.
Oh, let me think about that one for a second. That's a great question. Not really. We are, and I'll allude to this later on, but our farm model is very, we joke and we call it a get tough or die farm, which is from a
Oh yeah.
Johnny Cash song, Get Tough or Die. We really want to have resilient animals that are able to, deliver piglets on their own, deliver calves on their own. We try as best we can to work as stewards with what God's given us, but at the end of the day, we really want our animals to do their jobs, and we don't want to be helicopter, farmers.
Oh yeah.
And so I would say the gotcha, we did have one of our mama cows. She went down, it's been about a year and a half ago. She had trouble with a calf. And,
Oh yeah.
before that, all of our cows had dropped their calves without us even, I mean, basically, we just show up the next morning and here's a
Oh
calf
right.
standing there.
Right.
But we ended up having one of our cows went down with a calf and a tough birth. And I helped at the very end. Unfortunately, we lost the calf and we just
Oh
about
yeah.
lost the mama too. It was a miracle that we were able to get her through it. She ended up,
Oh yes.
we think that she had basically those pinched femoral nerves. And so she literally couldn't stand up. And
Oh
we
yeah. She
ended up,
couldn't control her back legs.
yeah, her back legs were
Yeah.
basically worthless, and it took about 5 days to get her up, and I had a lot of people praying, and I
Oh
had some
yeah.
really good mentors, talking to me about what I could do, and a lot of people honestly didn't have a whole lot of hope for her, and honestly, she finally stood up on that 5th day, which was amazing, and I milked her this morning, so we're very
Oh,
grateful.
very good.
But that was the kinda
Uh,
gotcha, where
yeah.
and we had heard that, when a cow's dropping a calf, you really need to pay attention. And of course, the beef guys and the guys running, 100 head of cattle, they're only going to be able to pay attention so much. But when we've only got 2 cows, that are bred, I can pay pretty close attention
Oh
and
yeah.
really try to be there when they go into labor. That way, if something does go awry, I can step in, even though I don't want to, and I'm not going to unless I have to. But on that scenario a year and a half ago, I could have intervened earlier and probably could have saved that calf, and
Oh
also
yeah.
probably could have done a lot better for my mama cow.
I grew up on a dairy, so we dairied for a number of years, and now we have beef cattle. And I know we had a neighbor that ran some really big cattle, and we used to go help pull calves for him all the time. But that's not something we want to do ever.
Yeah.
So basically, with our beef cows, I think I had to pull one in 23, but before that, it'd been a few years. But with dairy cows, we pulled a lot of calves, and our saying around here was, we've never pulled one too early, if they're presenting themselves, but we have pulled them too late. And
Yeah.
that's a tough one
Yeah.
always. For your cows, with just 2 cows, are you keeping a bull, or do you have an AI technician nearby that'll come breed them for you?
You know what? We have been a big fan of keeping our own bull or borrowing a bull.
Oh,
It's
yes.
been fortunate when we first started. We basically shared a bull with my brother-in-law. He has cows. And so we had an
Oh,
Angus
yes.
bull coming over to service our jerseys. And that worked out really well. Uh, and then, basically he ended up getting rid of that bull. So we've kind of been shuffling bulls through whenever we need them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we're raising one right now. He's actually getting ready to come online right now. He's a half Jersey, half brown Swiss. His name's
Oh,
his
yes.
name's Polo. Of course, we name our cows here on the homestead. And
Yeah.
he's a good one. He's beautiful, and as God willing, everything works properly. So we're getting ready to bring him over and test him out here in the next week or two. But all that to say, we do the whole natural thing. We don't do the AI, or we haven't done it yet. So we've been
Right.
fortunate in that way.
Yeah, keeping a bull when you just have a few cows, that's one of those tough decisions to figure out. Is it cost effective? If you want certain breeding, do you wanna go down the AI? route. And if you do, you've got to have a technician nearby that can get there and breed them when you need to. Or technically, it doesn't have to be nearby, but then you have to schedule it. Then that requires more work. I mean, there's a lot of questions and answers to be figured out on deciding, do we keep a bull? Do we not keep a bull? If you can find someone that's got a bull that'll let you use it, that works out really
Yeah,
well.
for sure. As long as it stays in the fences, I mean, that's the whole thing.
Oh,
When you bring a bull over, as long as
oh
he's
man.
entertained and he's got what he needs to, he's got feed and water and some girls to chase around, he'll, for the most part, he'll stay put for a minute at least. But you sure don't want to bring a
Right.
bull over that's gonna end up blowing through your fences and running down the holler, and next thing you know, your neighbors are upset and it's a
Oh
mess.
yeah. Yeah. We we have a strict rule. If a bull won't stay where we put him, he goes to a different farm. And most time, and we all know he goes to a farm, we take him to a sale barn. So he may have got his one ticket out.
Yeah.
But
I was gonna say the
yeah,
last one that did that to us, he got a one-way ticket to the green pastures above.
yes, yeah. But we don't have time to go figure out where the bull is, and then that's a whole job to get him in and everything. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, you don't after you chase a bull for about a week and he gets over the fence, you can't believe that a 1,500 pound bull can jump like a gazelle until you see it with your own
Oh,
eyes. But after you do that for a week chasing a bull around, you just realize this is not worth it. I'm never gonna do this again. And if they're unruly, they're gone. It's the same
oh,
and that's how we treat
yeah.
if I have a rooster that gets sideways, we've got egg-laying chickens, I don't mess around for 2 more seconds. That rooster is on his way, and I'm not gonna deal with it.
Oh, yeah. I I completely agree. The just any of that that causes more work is just not worth it.
Yeah.
Now, with your milk production, you mentioned your wife wanted to make butter. Are y'all making cheese? How is that process going utilizing the milk in house?
Yeah, so she's made lots of butter, and the butter is just the best butter you've ever had, and she'll make a lot of it, she'll freeze it. So
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's been great. And then she's messed around with some soft cheeses. Hasn't
Oh,
done any
yeah.
hard cheese yet, even though I've been begging for it. We're still buying pepper jack cheese and some other hard cheeses. But yeah, we use the milk. I mean, on the homestead, the beautiful thing is we've got chickens to feed, dogs to feed, cats to feed. And so the milk does not get wasted. We use it all the time for feeding everything. So it's not just us, and our friends that are consuming the milk. We really are able to feed the farm, so to speak, with the milk, so
Well, longtime listeners of the podcast know I'm dreaming about buying a milk cow or two.
yeah?
Having grown up on a dairy, though, I know that's another daily activity I'm adding to my list. So I've been very cautious about it. On the other hand, maybe your wife should plug her ears, but I've worn my wife down and she has agreed to it.
Yeah.
It's just taking the next step now.
You know what's funny is when my wife talked about milk cows, I told her, I said, "That's great and that's fine. You're gonna milk those cows. I am not gonna do it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
got other things to do. I don't wanna do it. It's not something that it's not on my bucket list." And it didn't take about 5 minutes before I was the one milking the cows, and,
Yeah.
I honestly really love it. I think that,
Uh,
you growing up around the dairy and being around the animals and your listeners, they know there's just something about it that speaks to us. I think that we're all basically designed to be out there stewarding animals and just being with them every day. And I honestly, I really like it a lot. The whole dairy cow thing, we calf share. And so that makes it really nice that if we wanted to go
oh,
out of
yeah.
town for a weekend or, the weather's terrible and we want to leave the calf on the mama overnight, we can do that. We don't have to milk
Oh, yeah. It
every
gives you that
day.
flexibility.
But that is something that people really have to consider when it comes to getting a dairy cow is you're going to be married to that dairy cow. When it's in milk, it has to be milked. You can't skip a day. You
Oh,
can't
yeah.
skip one milking. So then the next thing you do is you find a good farm sitter that if you're going to go out of town and you need that cow to be milked, and luckily we have a great farm sitter that knows how to milk and she's
Oh,
like you.
excellent.
She's been around dairy for a long time, and so she has no problem coming over and handling the cows. So
Yeah, that is excellent. When we dairied, um, we often had a high school student or two working for us. And I know one time, my dad got ran over with a tractor. He's okay. Um, it was an accident, and it took some recovery, but we headed to the hospital that day not knowing, and I didn't have an evening milker, and I didn't have anyone hired at the time. I had to hunt around, and I finally found a previous employee that I was able to get back to milk that night for me because we didn't know what was going on. But yeah, having someone close by that can step in is really beneficial.
Yeah.
Adam, for our listeners out there, I'm interested about your dairy cows, but I really didn't ask you to come on to talk about those because Mona Weathers from the Homesteading for Beginners podcast, her and I've talked a few times, and she recommended you as a guest on the podcast to talk about bees. And when I think about grazing grass and managing our farms, I think it's very important we stack enterprises. So you've got beef cows, add hair sheep. And that's the easy one. There's meat goats. There's all kinds of different ways. Are you running poultry? Are you doing some pigs, depending on your land and your context? But I view beekeeping as a adjacent enterprise. It's not quite the same skills you're going to use in managing grazing animals, but it fits on your same footprint. So to me, it's an adjacent enterprise. And that's why I wanted you on to share about your beekeeping journey. So let's just talk about that for a little bit. First off, the question is, why bees?
Yeah, why bees? Well, the answer to that is easy for me. It's honey. I've been eating honey since I
Oh,
was
I love
born.
honey.
My mom, she fed me peanut butter and honey sandwiches as a kid. And we just
Oh,
always
yes.
had honey growing up. It was just always one of those things we had in the house. And so when my wife and I got married and we started life together, um, peanut butter honey sandwiches are still my go-to as far as breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, dessert,
Oh,
whatever.
yes.
And then one thing, probably one of the very first healthy food eating choices I ever made was switching from putting sugar in my coffee to putting honey in my coffee.
Oh,
I
yes.
like candy bar coffee and,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
got a sweet tooth and I started using honey in my coffee and I really got hooked on that. And so Leslie and I, when we were moving from California to Tennessee to become homesteaders, one of the things on the list was honey because we consumed it every day. And everybody
Oh,
knows
yeah.
that honey's not cheap, it's expensive. And so,
No, it's not.
so when we got our homestead here in Middle Tennessee, the first thing we did was we bought chickens, egg laying chickens, because we eat eggs every day. We got a Great Pyrenees dog to protect those chickens. And then we ordered 3 packages of bees right off the bat. And so that's really how we got started with beekeeping. Had no idea what we were doing. I did all the things, that you're told to do. I started attending bee meetings. I read some books, watched some videos, got a mentor, and just basically started, leaning on other people's experiences and their knowledge to get going in bees. Just like you would do with
Oh,
beef
yeah.
cows or whatever it is. Like I need to go talk to some experts and find out how to do this. So that's really why we started was just to have honey every morning in our coffees, honestly.
You cannot beat that home-raised honey. That honey from your backyard hives or however you're doing it is so much better than anything you can get anywhere else.
Well, that's a thing that I teach and preach all day long. The best honey that you can possibly get is the honey off of your property.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows that honey's medicine. Man has been consuming honey for 10,000 years for medicine, basically. For your allergies, you need local honey. You need honey right off your property to help you with your allergies. And then
Oh,
there's
yeah.
tons of other medical uses for honey, any kind of skin conditions. My wife, her and her friends started making some farm value or farm added products using our honey and
Oh,
our
yeah.
beeswax. And so they make a lot of, beauty supplies and different things for the crunchy moms out there that have honey and have clean beeswax in them. So there's, just a lot of benefits to that honey. And
Oh, yeah.
it's really healthy for you.
Now, one thing you mentioned a while ago, to get started with bees, you ordered 3 packages. Did you order the hives to go with them from a company, or did you buy them locally? What was those first steps?
Yeah, so what I did was I did what everybody else does. I basically chose what frame style, what frame size and frame style I was going to use. Here in the Western world, we primarily use Langstroth, which are the vertical
Mhm.
style boxes that if you've ever seen beehives out and about, most likely they're the vertical stacked boxes. And so I went out to Amish country. We've actually got Amish that live really close to us, big community. And a couple of guys out there, they build bee boxes. So I went out there
Oh,
and
yes.
got 3 setups, vertical boxes. I used medium frames. It just basically got everything I needed to get going. And I bought those 3 packages of bees when they arrived. I think it was in March. I installed those into
Oh,
the
yeah.
into the hives and set sail from there. What I learned really quick, one of the things I learned that changed everything for me was at a bee meeting in that same month, March, April, and this is common across the Western world, is when you go to a bee club, the club meetings every month are going to talk about kind of what's coming up in the bee season. So at
Oh,
this
yeah.
yeah, so at this meeting, they brought up swarm trapping and swarm catching. And I listened and listened the whole time and I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. And basically by the end of it, I was like, they basically explained that it's really easy to trap bees and that, you can trap all the bees you want basically. So I came home that day and I built a couple swarm traps as fast as I could out of scrap wood to fit the frames that I was using, and I put those couple swarm traps out not 150 yards from our house. And it was about 6 weeks later that I trapped a monster swarm, a huge swarm.
Oh, yes.
And at that point, I was totally hooked. But I soon learned that those bees that I trapped were actually better bees than I bought. And the reason is the bees that
Oh,
I
yeah.
bought came from Georgia, most likely, which isn't too far away, but it's a different climate. Those bees had already had some things done with them that I realized I don't want to do those things. I told you about our Get Tough or Die farm model. And that includes, really just trying to be minimalist and let the animals and the bees do their thing and do what they do best. And so I don't feed sugar water. I don't treat for varroa mites. And those are 2 things that commercial beekeepers, and that's where you would buy bees from. That's 2 things that most beekeepers do. So I
Oh, yeah.
learned that that feral swarm that showed up to my swarm trap, they actually know how to do their jobs. They've never been propped up by those 2 things, by feed and by treatment. And basically, they are a low to no maintenance bee. And so when you talk about hardy livestock, you talk about hardy hogs, you talk about hardy cows, these bees are hardy bees. And, basically, I've just never looked back from there. I've never bought a bee again since then.
Oh,
I
yes.
trap swarms every single spring. I teach people how to trap swarms. It's really easy. People can trap swarms right in the middle of a city. You can trap swarms out in the country. Anywhere that there's honeybees present, you have the possibility and the probability of trapping feral swarms. And so that's the cornerstone of what I do. All of that ended up morphing into basically teaching. I found that there just wasn't a lot of people out there teaching what I'm doing. And I'm
Oh, yeah.
catering to backyard beekeepers, to homesteaders, small operations, basically, and people that have a farm model like I do, where they want things more natural, they want things clean.
Right.
And this is the
Right.
way to do it. This is the way to get clean honey, clean wax, and have a low to no maintenance system set up on your property and get the benefits of honeybees.
And I want to talk a little bit more about those swarm traps a little bit later. But something you said there was you don't feed sugar water. And I know anyone who's done any kind of research about bees online, they're going to be say you order packages or there's like our local club, they're big into pushing the nukes and get nukes, but sugar water is a topic for either one of those and used in abundance. However, you're not using it. What have you found by not using it, and what are you doing so you don't have to use it?
So, you know, for me, really, I just kind of started thinking about, we have these other issues with varroa mites and these different pests that the bees suffer from. Varroa mites are blamed for colony collapse. They introduce diseases to the honeybees. So it's just like ticks on deer, or tick on us. We could end up getting some diseases from those ticks. Well, if you think about us, you and I, if we pour nothing but junk food and sugar into our bodies, and then we go expose ourselves to ticks and we get tick bites, our bodies are going to have a really hard time fighting against those diseases that could be introduced by that tick, right? So,
Right.
to me, the same thing is happening with honeybees. Sugar only has one sugar in it, pure sugar. It's only got one sugar in it. The nectar from flowers, anybody can Google this right now. As soon as we're done, they can fact check me. There's 3 different types of sugars in that nectar. There's essential minerals, essential vitamins, all kinds of things inside of that natural nectar that makes real honey. So it's nutrient dense honey that the bees need. It's also the kind of honey that I want to consume and that I want you to consume, because if if we're consuming this as, medicinal, then we want the best product possible. So you are what you eat, right? Everybody knows this. So whatever you're feeding your beef cows, that is what they're going to become, right? They are what they
Oh,
eat.
yeah.
Whatever I feed my hogs, whatever I feed my chickens. Well, if you're feeding your bees sugar water, I'm telling you, it changes the pH inside of the hive. It affects their immune systems. So if they're sitting in there all winter long, eating what we call funny honey because it's been adulterated by sugar water, they are not getting the best nutrient dense honey that they could possibly eat over the winter. So that is a problem for me. So I
Right.
want less inputs into my property. So if I have to, let's say, God forbid, there's another pandemic or something happens where there's supply chain issues, how many beekeepers out there are going to flip out because they can't go get a pallet of sugar from Walmart? And then your second part to that question is, how do I manage that then? If I'm not feeding, what am I doing? Well, I'm leaving the bees plenty of honey all the time. So once the bees get
Oh, yeah.
established, and then if we back up to what I talked about before with the swarms, when the swarm arrives in springtime naturally and I trap it, they actually come with a belly full of honey from wherever they left. They gorge themselves on honey. Well, the first thing they do when they get to that swarm trap is they start building comb as fast as they can so the queen can lay eggs, and then they immediately deposit that honey that they've got in their bellies in those cells. I have had this happen, and I've got multiple other beekeepers that have had this happen where we trap a huge swarm in the springtime. And within 10 to 14 days, that box, that swarm trap, can weigh up to 75 pounds because it's
Oh,
full
wow.
of honey. And so those bees come ready to do work and to get it done in a hurry. And they're already preparing themselves for the next winter. Whereas if you're getting bees that have already been fed sugar water, they come with sugar water. I just,
Mhm.
and there's people
Yeah.
out there that'll argue with me over the like lazy bees and all this stuff. All I know is that they are already, I believe their immune systems are already compromised, and that they are not going to get the work done that a swarm is going to get done when they show up to your swarm trap. So that's why I tell people the best things, the best things in life are free. There's some work involved in putting up a swarm trap. It's not that hard, but those free bees are better bees than you can buy, hands down.
Well, when we talk about regenerative ag or regenerative grazing, we're all about managing our natural resources better to improve the environment, but also provide better feed for our cows so we're not bringing in inputs. With the beekeeping, you know, the honey they produce is going to be far superior to any sugar you bring in or the water you bring in and import into their hive.
100%.
Yeah.
And this is where I red pill your audience, and I love to do this. The honey that you're buying off the shelf at the store, even the honey that you're buying on the street corner, from somebody, if it's me, I'm gonna ask the questions. Do you feed? I hear,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
can ask it in a way to where you're not, coming down on somebody, because I'm not gonna come down on
Right.
anybody. If you want to feed your bees and treat your bees, that's totally up to you. I'm a big fan of
Right.
freedom and liberty, so you do you. I'm gonna do me. But if
Right.
I am buying a quart of honey on the street corner, I'm going to ask the questions and I'm going to ask it, hey, I hear it's a thing, people treat and feed. Do you do that? And if they say they feed and treat, then I'll say, good to know. I was just wondering. I heard about that,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then I'm going to move on and I'm going to go buy some honey from somebody like me because I know what it is. I know what it tastes like. I know the medicinal properties of it. And so that's what I'm going to do. And then you touched on the whole, the regenerative model, farm model. And of course, this is a buzzword these days, but it's something
Oh, yes.
that we are paying attention to, that we want things that are sustainable. And we feel like,
Yes.
and I'm sure your listeners are just like me, like we feel like we have not been good stewards of this planet probably over the last decade, 5 decades, 10 decades. But that doesn't matter. I'm not blaming anybody else. Today, I've got this little farm that I need to take care of. And how can I be the best steward of it and leave it, better than I found it? And that
Right.
is
Yeah.
through regenerative practices when it comes to the honeybees, when it comes to the cows, when it comes to the rabbits and the pigs and all that stuff. Is just figuring out how can I create a system that's healthy and that's a living ecosystem where everything is benefiting from everything else.
Right. I completely agree with that. And you talked about treating, so many farms, we don't want to spray pesticides or insecticides on our animals or grass. Same thing when we're talking about our bees. If you're putting chemicals in there, some's going to show up in the honey. I, I'm sure there's tests and there's probably debates about that, but if you have no chemicals going in, you can greatly reduce what's coming out.
That's right.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned early on, you followed that traditional model to get started. You bought those packages and got some Langstroth hives. Did you continue along that path with your vertical Langstroth hives?
So I did not. I found out about horizontal hives, which is sort of newer to America, to the Western world. Langstroth was a gentleman that he studied in Ohio in the 1850s, and he's the one that developed the Langstroth vertical box model. And he had some unbelievable discoveries, and he really is the godfather of beekeeping in the Western world. And we learned
Oh, yeah.
he really did set us up for what we're doing today. The issue is that the commercial industry, which is all big money, big ag, big money, they have completely embraced and adopted that system, and they've made it more economical for what they do. So the hive boxes themselves, this is my one of the biggest issues between vertical hives, and I'm going to talk about horizontal hives in a minute.
Okay.
So vertical hives, the hive body construction is about 3/4 of an inch thick, right? The box itself. If you go out into the woods and we go out and we find bees living in a tree out in the woods, they're living in a hollowed out tree that's got 5-inch thick sidewalls around it, right? And I've even seen it where the trees are hollowed out all the way down to the soil. So if you think about winter inside of that tree with those super thick sidewalls and with it hollowed out all the way down to the soil, where the soil, the temperature of the soil is pretty regular all year round,
Oh,
they
yeah.
have a home in there that's really, really good. We are using the boxes because, we want to manage the bees and have them to where we can go have removable frames and we can get the honey and we can manage the bees. But that box is not a well insulated box for winter or for summer, but
Oh, yeah.
especially winter. So a lot of people, there's commercially made jackets and different things you can do to your boxes to help insulate them over the winter. And that's great. But what I started doing is I moved to horizontal hives. And when I say horizontal hives, a lot of times people automatically think, oh, what do you mean you're putting your frames in sideways?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
the frames are still vertical. They're hanging vertical, but the horizontal hive is a chest shaped box. So
Oh, well,
instead of the
yes.
bees moving up vertically through boxes, they're moving from right to left or left to right through the box. And the bees have zero problem with this. They adapt. They will absolutely use whatever you give them to start building out comb and to organize and to do everything they want to do. So when I build these horizontal hives, I'm now building them out of true 2-inch construction. If you go to Lowe's or Home
Oh, yeah.
Depot, you're looking at 1.5 inch. But even then, if you think about the insulating properties of that versus the 3/4 inch, it's a huge difference. And
Oh,
and
yeah.
I find my bees, of course, in Middle Tennessee, we have about a 10-day winter, and people still complain about it. I think it's hilarious. And I'm probably one of those people.
Yeah, well, I'm in Oklahoma, so I feel it.
Yeah. And we spent a little time in Colorado, in Denver, so I kinda know what a winter feels like. But even here in Middle Tennessee, I have had vertical boxes right next to my horizontal hives, the different thicknesses on the bodies, and I've seen my bees be more active on a 40-degree day in my horizontal hives versus my
Oh,
vertical
yes.
hives where they're just dead quiet. And it's because they're in there, tight as a ball, trying to keep their warmth. Whereas in the horizontal hive, they're nice and toasty. And I'm seeing them come out, they're doing cleansing flights and going back in. So all that to say that the horizontal hives, that's one of the biggest things, is that the insulating body, or the insulating properties of the hive body, are better. It's interesting though,
Oh, yeah.
Langstroth, when he originally designed the vertical boxes, I believe he made it out of 2-inch lumber. It was 1.5 inch or 2-inch
Oh, yeah.
lumber, which would be extremely heavy. And so that's probably why the commercial industry and beekeepers in general have reduced the thickness so that they're nice and light, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of the differences. Another huge difference is on inspection. So I'm all about let the bees be bees, leave the bees alone, let the bees do their thing. On a vertical hive, to do an inspection, and you know this if you've had vertical hives, and everybody out there will know this, but I'll explain it, is they're stackable boxes. And so when you go to do an inspection, you literally have to tear that house down in half, or in thirds, fourths, even if you've got 4 boxes stacked up, to do a hive inspection and check on your queen, if that's what your mission is. In a
Right.
horizontal hive, I literally know right where my brood nest is, which is where the queen is, the baby bees are, and I can identify where in that chest I need to pull a frame. I can leave the rest of it completely covered up, expose the 1 or 2 frames I need, pull them up, look at my frame, see what I need to see, put it back in, close it up, and walk away. And that's my inspection. And so when you do hive inspections on vertical hives and you tear apart that house, I've done it. It is almost impossible not to smash bees as you're doing that. You're completely doing an air exchange with the outside air, the temperature, you're
Oh,
changing
yeah.
the temperature, and the bees get irate. And I believe understandably so. And so that's why, you, beekeepers have got to wear a spacesuit, right? To make sure that they're not getting stung. I keep my bees in horizontal hives, and this is my protection right here. I wear glasses because I don't want to get stung in the eye, just in
Oh, yeah.
case I have a bee come out angry. But in general, as long as I don't smash or pinch a bee when I pull a frame out, I don't get stung. And I keep bees all the
Oh,
time,
yeah.
just like this, in a t-shirt. I also have classes all the time in my apiary with homeschool classes, and we host a lot of classes. And I will literally pull a frame out covered in honeybees and have the kids come up one at a time and taste real raw honey straight off that frame, with bees
Oh,
running
yes.
around on it, all these nervous moms standing in the background, and nobody gets stung. And the only reason I'm able to do that is because I'm using horizontal hives. The bees know that the last time I was in there, I did not assault them. Whereas if you're using vertical
Right.
hives, those bees know the last time you were there, you came out there in your white spacesuit and you assaulted that hive. When you come back 2 weeks later or whenever it is, they're going to be ready. They're going to be popping you in the veil. You're
Oh,
going to
yeah, they
hear them.
recognize you.
Yeah, you're going to hear them hitting. And I've done it. I've been there. So when people see, when orthodox conventional beekeepers see what I do as far as classes and having these little kids run up to the hive, they can't believe it. They would never do that. And of course, I would never do that either if I had vertical hives or if I was using
Oh,
vertical
yeah.
hives. But that is, to me, that's one of the really big things about horizontal hives, is it's just less aggressive on the bees, and it's easier on the bees. It's easier on the beekeeper. The third thing is the easiest on the beekeeper. When you pull a box of honey off the top of a 3 or 4, stacked vertical boxes, those boxes, can weigh 40 to 80 pounds.
Oh,
And you're
yeah.
twisting, like if they're full of honey, you're twisting and you're pulling these boxes off. It's not fun. Not fun at all, especially in like May, June when it gets hot. On my horizontal hives, it's one frame at a time. So if I'm going to pull honey,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pulling one frame out at a time. And those weigh 4 to 6 pounds. No big deal. So I want to keep bees until I'm about 150 years old. And to do that, I really need to stick with the horizontal hives.
Very good. And Adam, I'm sure we could continue down this path even longer, but let's transition just a little bit to our overgrazing section sponsored by Redmond. And at Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. We're going to take a deeper dive, and for our deeper dive today, let's talk about having bees on pasture. So most of our audience are running cattle, running sheep, goats, a few are dairying. They have poultry, but they may not have bees. So first off, we've talked about a lot of benefits, but could you just give us a little summary of why they should have bees on their pastures?
Yeah, absolutely. Bees visit grasses. They especially clover, legumes, flowers, anything that's flowering, the bees are all over it. And so when you're getting the superior pollination of honeybees, you're going to see things change on your property. And I've had my neighbors come over and talk to me, out where we live. It's pretty rural. And I've had neighbors come over and say, I've never had a garden grow like it grew this year. And I
Oh,
know it's
yes.
because of your honeybees, because I've seen your honeybees all over my garden. So, we don't see it. We don't, it's not something that you're going to see every day because you're not going to go out there and just stand right in the middle of the grass and watch for honeybees. And honeybees, they go to the best nectar source at the moment. And so, whatever that is that day, that's where they're going to go. So we see bees regularly on early in the year. We'll see it on the dandelions. We'll see bees on the
Oh, yeah.
dandelions. And then later in the summer or in the spring, the white clover is kind of the last thing to bloom. And the bees are all over the white clover. And of course, our chickens and our cows love the white clover. And then other grasses. We've got Johnson grass, fescue. We've got all kinds of different grass. And from time to time, I will see my bees running around on those grasses. I'm not even sure what they're getting off of them, but
Oh, yes.
if there's pollen or there's nectar and the bees are interested in it, they will absolutely go to it. So the bees benefit everything around you, and they go out to a 3-mile radius from their colony to forage. So all of the trees benefit, all of the grasses benefit. And like I said, the clover, the legumes, the flowers, all of that benefit, which ultimately is going to end up benefiting your farm, your homestead, whatever you've got, your pastures are going to be benefited by honeybees, no doubt.
Now, when we think about honeybees and we think about the benefits they provide, and someone says, maybe I should do honeybees. I'm not sure how much time it'll take. How much time are we talking about the bees will take if you add this adjacent enterprise to your operation?
So if you do it my way, and I wrote a book, you should get my book, Bee Kept with Wild and Free Honeybees. Forgot what I was going to say there for a second. That's a book that I just put out. But basically, if you do bees the way that I do them, and I'm not the only one doing this, but it's a low to no maintenance system. And so literally, get several swarm traps. I would say maybe 4 swarm traps because I have a 50% success rate trapping swarms. Get a
Oh, yeah.
couple of hives, and I obviously advise horizontal hives. And then once you trap the bees and you put them in the hives, you literally just let them go and let them just do their job. You can basically get away with 2 to 3 visits per year if you want honey. Other than that, if you don't even want honey, you could literally put bees on the back 40 in those boxes and just leave them alone and walk by them every once in
Oh,
a while
yeah.
and see if they're still there. Even if something happened and they left, if they absconded or they swarmed themselves to death or whatever, bees will end up coming back to that place. They will come back the next spring and re-inhabit that cavity, that horizontal hive or whatever you've got, and boom, they'll just start going again. So it's almost like you could have it almost like a bat house on your property to where it's like, I don't want to ever get stung by a honeybee. I don't want to mess with honeybees. I know the value of honeybees to our property, to the
Oh,
pastures.
yeah.
And so I could literally do it Adam's way, set them up on the back 40, forget about them, as long as you've got a little fencing around them so the cows don't go rub their heads on the boxes or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
What I do is I throw up a kind of a fake electric fence around my boxes and the cows leave them alone. They don't mess with them.
Oh, yeah.
I had a doggone bull one day that I was getting after him, telling him to, get lost or something. And he, just to spite me, he walked over and he took his head, knocked over one of my beehives. And that's
Oh,
the only
yes.
time I've ever
Yeah.
had that happen, and that hive was not protected by my little fake fence. So he
Oh, yeah.
probably wouldn't have done that had it been protected, but you could
Well,
do it
yeah, I
you can
agree.
really do it in a low to no maintenance way if you want to.
Yeah. So if you're just wanting to increase the bee population, you could do it with requires very little time. However, if you wanna harvest honey from it, it's gonna take a little bit more time, but we're still not talking about you're creating a whole new job for yourself.
That's correct. If you do it the way I do it, I do not if I can get away with it, in fact, I would if I didn't have classes here and we weren't getting into the hives for the classes. If I did the bees that the way that I do them, it'd be twice, maybe 3 times a year that I would get into them, only
Oh,
for
yeah.
honey. Basically, what I teach is you do a spring expansion to give the bees plenty of room to expand. You do a fall contraction so that they can stay warm in the winter in the smallest, tightest space. And that's it. I mean, that's really 2 times a year, and then I'll get in there if I find excess honey in March, if I find it in June, if I find it in October, anytime I find excess honey outside of what I know they need for the winter, then I will take it. Other than that, I'm gonna button
Oh,
them
yeah.
up, walk away, and just leave them alone.
N A couple of things you mentioned there, and you mentioned throughout, swarm traps and horizontal hives. Where where I think you mentioned building them. Are those things that people can go out and buy, or do they need to build them? And if they need to build them, where are you finding plans?
So there's a few options. There's actually a lot of people. There's tons of people out there building swarm traps for sure. A swarm trap would be really easy to get your hands on that fit Langstroth frames, which is those frames are super common. And so that if you just want to buy, that's pretty easy to do. As far as building, there's free plans online. Multiple people have different plans depending on what you want to build. The
Oh, yeah.
the website that I've used the most that's got really good plans on it right now until we have our own plans is horizontalhive.com. And at horizontalhive.com, you can have plans for swarm traps and plans for horizontal hives. They use a different frame style at horizontalhive.com for their swarm traps. But if you just go
Oh,
looking, you'll be able to find a plan for a swarm trap for Langstroth frames, which is the Western American frame. You should be able to find a plan for that, no problem.
oh, yeah. Very good. So someone puts out a swarm trap and they have some bees move into it. What's their next step?
So basically, we'll back up just a teeny bit. So it's pretty simple. A guy named Dr. Seeley, he's world renowned, still around teaching classes, but he did all his work back in the late 70s at Cornell University. And there's a book called Honeybee Democracy that he wrote. That was his first book, very heady book, but I'll just sum it up real quick. There's a page in there that all of us swarm trappers take the synopsis of what he found and we use it. So he studied honeybees in nature, in the Arnott Wilderness, and he figured out what bees prefer in a cavity size and a bunch of other things. So first of all, they prefer 15 foot. He found they preferred 15 foot over 3 foot. So the
Oh, yeah.
higher that you can get the swarm trap, the more that it's preferred by the bees. Now I tell people, do not kill yourself putting a swarm trap up 15 feet up off the ground. I'm very fortunate here in Tennessee. We've got deer stands up on our trees, and it's pretty easy for me to pull a swarm trap up and get it up onto a deer stand.
Oh, yeah.
However, if you don't have trees, if you live in a condo in downtown Nashville, I would personally swarm trap right on my balcony on that condo. Or if you want to mount a swarm
Oh, yeah.
trap to the side of your barn or put it on a fence corner, I've literally trapped bees in a swarm trap 3 feet off the ground. So the sky's the limit when it comes to that. It's just that bees prefer, the higher you go, the more preferential it looks to them, or the more that they would
Oh,
prefer
yeah.
it. The most important thing Seeley found was the cavity size. What he found was that they preferred 40 liters, which for the rest of us is 1.4 cubic feet. 1.4 cubic feet.
Oh, okay.
So actually, your Langstroth Deep box, if anybody's familiar with that, that is exactly 1.4 cubic feet. So apparently, Langstroth
Oh.
knew what he was doing when he came up with that design.
Oh, yes.
So I say bigger is better. Don't go smaller than 1.4 cubic feet. I made this mistake early on. I built some small swarm traps, and people commonly will take an old nuke box that they've got or something, and they'll say, well, I'm just going to use that for a swarm trap. Well, it's too small. What you'll end
Oh,
up
yeah.
doing is you'll end up trapping a small swarm. We don't want small swarms. We want big, huge swarms.
Right.
So 1.4 cubic feet should be the minimum. Next thing Seeley found, and this is a critical aspect, is face the entrance south. So on my swarm traps, I face them south. On my beehives, I face them south. Everything gets faced south. And he said that they prefer that. And I have definitely found that to be true. The next thing is he came up with a measurement for the entrance size that they prefer. And I did the calculation on it, and it's about 1.5 inches. So 1.5 square inches
Oh, okay.
is a big enough entrance. And what I do is I drill a 1.5 inch round hole in all of my boxes, and I use what's called an entrance disc. We sell those on our website, and you can find them around, but it's called an entrance disc, and they're very versatile. The hole is really easy to drill versus cutting in a slot, which
Oh,
you'll see
yeah.
on a lot of things. Let me see here. I think that's it. So what I do is I get a swarm trap bigger than 1.4 cubic feet. I find a tree that I want to put that swarm trap on that tree. And what I do is I pick out a tree that I want to have bees at the base of that tree. So
Oh,
the
okay.
idea is that I can trap the bees in the swarm trap. And once they're in there, I say to leave them in there 10 to 21 days. My reasons for that is you give the queen time to lay eggs, and I call them anchor babies. Once she's got those anchor babies in there, she's not going anywhere. But when she arrives, she's flighty. So if you went and messed with her on day one,
Oh, yeah.
day two, day three, she could fly off if she didn't like what you're doing. So if you wait 10 days, you're pretty much guaranteed. I've never had one leave after I've left them in there for 10 days minimum. And then 21 days maximum. And that's because the bees will start to outgrow that cavity in a hurry. The swarm trap is just a
Oh, yes.
temporary home. So think of it as just a temporary home. And you want those bees to explode with growth. At 21 days, those baby bees that I talked about, the anchor babies, they're starting to hatch. And so your population is going to explode. It's going to become a very serious problem if you continue to leave bees in there. So I bring the bees down at 10 to 21 days, and I put them in their forever home at the base of that tree. And the reason is they don't have to reset. If you stay inside of that 15 foot, the bees have no problem going from 15 foot above down to their forever home and
To
finding
the
it.
new hive.
So I just
Oh,
transfer the
yes.
frames into the forever home and lock it up, walk away. I take that swarm trap and I put it on another tree. I don't put it back up in the same tree because your forager bees will get confused and they'll go back to that trap. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't want to do that. You want to pick another tree or another place, or even maybe wait a week if you wanted to go back into that same location.
Do you try to, when you're choosing the next location, you try and go a certain distance away from where you already have a hive? Or how do
Uh,
you decide
I
that?
don't worry about that too much.
Oh,
If you
okay.
had a ton of property, bees naturally out in nature, I'm pretty sure Seeley says that they'll stay, I can't remember, it might be about a mile apart naturally, which kind of makes sense. In Middle Tennessee, we're blessed with a super huge nectar flow, and there's just plenty out there for them to get. So I feel like I could put 20, 30, 40 hives on my property and not worry about not having enough nectar to go around for all my honeybees.
Oh, yeah.
But not everybody lives where I live. So to spread them out a little bit there's nothing wrong with that. But to have a couple of them right there together, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Well, that's great information for someone who's considering getting started. My suggestion, if they want to do that, you have your book, and I meant to have my book in front of me, and I don't. Bee Kept with Wild and Free Honeybees that's available. And you can get that probably off your website, and Amazon would be, I, I assume it's on Amazon.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You can get it on our website. Our publisher is Sawdust Publishing. So you could also go there and then go to Amazon. If you go to beekept.com, we've got all kinds of other ways for people to learn. We've got an online course through the School of Traditional Skills where I teach everything from A to Z, what I do and how I do it. We also host in-person classes. They're called Beekept boot camps. And so we
Oh,
get
yes.
hands on for 5 hours. I do a working lunch where I talk and answer questions, but we basically just get into the bees. And again, I teach everything I do from A to Z. You get to see the swarm traps, you get to get hands on bees. And that's a really important part of learning. Also, at our website, we started a BK Bee Club, is what we call it. It's our own bee club where we focus on natural and sustainable beekeeping methods. So if you go to the local bee club, and I encourage everybody to get involved in their local bee club, the thing is that you won't hear a lot about what I'm doing because they're following the traditional ways to keep bees. So if you're interested in more natural and sustainable beekeeping methods and regenerative beekeeping, then you're going to want to get probably involved in a club like mine
Oh,
where
yeah.
where we're able to talk about these things because we don't it's frustrating if I go and I teach everything I teach to somebody that's doing it traditionally, and they come teach me the same thing. Like we're just not doing things the same way. So anyways, that's what we put together. And then we're also on Facebook, on Instagram. We just started a YouTube channel. So you can find all that on our website.
Oh, very good, Adam. Adam, we're going to go ahead and wrap up with the famous four questions. Today's famous four questions are sponsored by Manderley Farms Grazing Conference. Attention, all farmers, ranchers, and land enthusiasts. Join us for an unforgettable grazing conference on February 21st and 22nd, 2025. At the beautiful Manderley Farms in Pikeville, Tennessee, nestled in the scenic Sequatchie Valley. This is your chance to learn from the best in the business. Our speakers include the renowned Greg Judy alongside the dynamic duo Greg and Debbie Brand. Expect engaging sessions, informative pasture walks, and interactive question and answer sessions with our experts. Discover how to revolutionize your land management with regenerative grazing practices. Whether you're looking to enhance soil health, increase biodiversity, or improve your pasture productivity, this conference is tailored for you. Don't miss this opportunity to grow your knowledge and your farm. For more details and secure your spot, visit www.manderleyfarms.com. That's Manderley. Same four questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first, and actually, as I think about the questions, let me rephrase that. We may want to answer them in two ways: grazing grass and beekeeping. So, our first question: what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource? So, for grazing, do you have a favorite resource you would recommend?
The people that we follow probably the closest with what we do with dairy cows and homesteading are the Dohertys, and their book was it one oh Independent Homestead.
Independent
Is it
Homestead.
Farmstead?
Oh, yes.
My wife's fact checking me. It's Independent Farmstead. Sean and Beth Doherty, and they've been doing natural regenerative farming methods for decades with their dairy cows. They feed their dairy cows straight off of their farm. They have next to no input. I don't think they have any inputs on their farm. And so they're the ones probably that we follow the closest with what we do that
Oh,
matches
yeah.
what we're up to. We love Joel Salatin and everything he's written. So Folks This Ain't Normal was the book that changed our lives when we when we listened to that book. It
Oh,
really put
yes.
us on the path that we're on. So those would be my recommendations.
Oh, yes. Excellent resources. Let's turn that question just a little bit different. Besides your book, what would be a beekeeping resource you would recommend?
Keeping Bees with a Smile by Fedor Litsutin. That's a great book. That one really does encapsulate what I do. It's written from a northern Russia perspective. So that's kind of the difference there. I'm able to really talk about what we've got going on here in America as far as climate
Oh,
and
yeah.
whatnot, even though we have some people up north that experience some severe winters. But that's Keeping Bees with a Smile is a good one. Anything from Dr. Seeley. His original book was Honeybee
Oh, yes.
Democracy, but he's now written multiple books since then. He is an excellent resource for what I do and for beekeepers worldwide.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Our second question: what's your favorite tool for the farm or apiary?
My favorite tool for the apiary would be my hive tool. I use a KW hive tool, and it's essential for beekeeping.
Oh, yes.
My second tool on the beekeeping would be my smoker, of course, and I use a made in the USA classic smoker that I bought off of eBay, an old one, oldie but goodie. And
Yes.
then on the farm, I've got a John Deere skid steer that I've got about 3,500 hours in, and I love moving dirt, cutting trenches, drilling fence post holes, moving hay, using the forks. My skid steer's definitely a huge tool, so I love it.
Outside of not having any money to buy one, it scares me to get one because I think of all the things I could do with it.
Yeah, if you get a skid steer, plan on having a side hustle because all your neighbors and friends will be
Oh,
hitting you
yeah.
up. So make sure you get a good trailer and a truck to pull it around. Skid steers are very handy.
Oh, yeah. Our third question: what would you tell someone just getting started? And that could be with grazing, homesteading, beekeeping, however you want to go with that.
Well, we hit on it right off the bat, but just do it. Just jump in both feet. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be beautiful. You don't have to, spend years studying it. Keep it simple, stupid. That was something I learned in the fire department a long time ago. We talked about how, we get pigs and then we start thinking about fencing, or we get cows and we start thinking about a milker. I mean, we've done things
Oh,
backwards multiple times, and that's not really probably sound advice. But I just don't want people to be overwhelmed or afraid. I think that there's always this mythological fear of honeybees or of big cows or whatever it is, and I think we need to just be more confident in jumping in and learning from other people, and how to do things as we
oh,
go
yeah.
and getting hands on. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent advice. And lastly, Adam, where can others find out more about you?
So the main thing is beekept.com. I know we hit it pretty, hard earlier, but
Yeah.
go to beekept.com, and really that's going to be your avenue to find everything else we're doing. We're going to be teaching at multiple different festivals, homestead festivals this year. Homesteaders of America is a May event. They also have an
Oh,
October
yes.
event in Front Royal, Virginia. So we'll be there. We've got one coming up in Townsend, Tennessee as well. So we've got a lot going on, and there's plenty of avenues for people to get a hold of me. I'm super available as far as like messaging and text messages and phone calls and emails. Sign up for our free email. But if people have questions going forward from here, on beekeeping or whatever it is, reach out to me and I'd love to talk to you and help you get on your own bee adventure.
Well, very good, Adam. We appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being on here today, and I wish all your listeners a great rest of their day.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. It gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.